Hi there, I'm Wendy Magee. Thank you to Andrew for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm very sorry that I couldn't be with you in person. However, last night I taught myself to use iMovie and GarageBand, so I've made this little movie for you, and please forgive the glitches. In this presentation, I'm going to be giving a quick overview of the research and information to date about music technology and music therapy, and then considering practice and research on this topic and think about the future directions for both research and practice. I'm now going to give a very brief history of music technology and music therapy, and in particular thinking about the research. And I'll say at the outset, please forgive me if I have excluded research which you have undertaken. This is just a very brief snapshot to have a look at where we've come from, where we are, and thinking about where we're going to. We can see from this slide that research was actually taking place on this topic as long ago as 1988, when Robert Kraut did his doctoral research on the topic, swiftly followed by Joe Nagler doing his doctoral research on the topic in 1993. However, there seemed to be a bit of a lull in the 1990s, and there wasn't a great deal published or researched on the topic of music technology and music therapy. Now, in 2001, of course, music technology and how we engage in music listening on an everyday basis was sort of turned upside down by the release of the iPod. Then in 2002, at the World Congress for Music Therapy, a non-music therapist stood up and gave a paper claiming that music therapists were not engaging with music technology because it empowered the clients too much. I'll just say that again. This non-music therapist who was engaged in promoting and selling a piece of music technology claimed that music therapists weren't using music technology because it empowered the clients. Now, I took offence at this, and this is really what's prompted all of my research since that time, starting with a survey of the British music therapists in 2003, where I explored how many music therapists were using technology, and of the population that weren't using technology, why weren't they using technology? This led on to a qualitative study with Karen Berland, where we defined music technology, music therapy practice which used music technology, and we also looked at scope of practice using these tools. And then this expanded even further with a project I did in collaboration with Berklee College of Music, where I explored music technology as it was being used in therapeutic and health settings. Now, during that project, the iPad went on sale. In 2011, an international survey was undertaken by Hannah et al., which replicated that survey I undertook in 2003, and that's just come out in the Arts and Psychotherapy. And then next year, there'll be the first published book on music technology as it's being used in music therapy. And that book is called Music Technology in Therapeutic and Health Settings. There was also an important column in Music Therapy Perspectives in the 1990s, which I didn't mention, Integrating Technology by Robert Kraut, and that's an important resource. But let's have a look at this timeline. 24 years we know that music technology is being used in music therapy. And yet the iPod was only released in 2001, and the iPad was only released 2 years ago. So here I think we need to stand back and look at technology in the general population and think about how much has been turned upside down in very recent history, in just 2 years. And let's think about this in the broader picture about how music therapists are actually engaging with music technology. Now, this is the most recent publication on the topic, 2012, in the Arts and Psychotherapy, and some of the following slides are actually based on this survey undertaken by Nicole Hanna et colleague. So I would encourage you to read this article. So if we think about that historical slide, we can ask, have music therapists been too slow on the uptake of using technology in practice? Or have we adopted technology too fast without actually having any guidelines for practice? Or has it been just about right? But I'd also like to throw into the mix, what is music technology anyway? Because when I started my research, it was just the use of assistive devices linked to software. Again, considering that historical slide, I would like to propose that the music therapy profession has incorporated technology into practice in response to both the clinical needs of our clients, but also in response to wider developments taking place in music technology in society. Now, moving on to issues affecting practice, it's a little disappointing to find that the results of the international survey undertaken by Nicole Hanna and her colleagues reflect the findings of my survey done in Britain in 2003. Largely, one of the biggest issues affecting music therapists using technology in practice is access to resources. And this doesn't just mean access to expensive piece of technology, but also that we still don't really have adequate training for using technology in clinical practice. Yes, there's plenty of training provided nowadays about how to use GarageBand, how to use iTunes, but we really don't have training which is specifically geared to how to use these tools in practice, and that's something we really need to address. One of the other issues is that music therapists are often approached by inventors of music technology. I've called this inventors and gadgets. Approached by inventors who really want to sell their gadgets. They've come up with a great idea and they think it's going to fit people with disabilities really well. And from my experience, trying to fit a gadget to a person in this sort of top-down approach is problematic. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Lastly, there are issues around generation of the therapists using technology and also gender of the therapists. And this is something which was emerged from the 2012 survey of Nicole Hanna et al. Now, Nicole and her colleagues found something which actually isn't so surprising really around generation of therapists and also gender. So we need to be aware that people born before 1960 are known as digital immigrants, meaning that we, and I'm in that category, we haven't grown up using technology in our everyday life. It's a foreign concept. It's not in our genes, and this is really quite different for younger generations of people who have grown up with more modern technology. So this has implications for therapists who are born before 1960, may be less likely to use music technology in practice, may be less inclined to, may not like it, and may not know how to. So just to be aware of that. And at the risk of alienating transgendered people and women in the room, we need to think carefully about gender and the implications for how we are training music therapists. Music therapy is predominantly a female profession, and there's an emerging body of research suggesting that technology is a construct which is more biased towards males. So we just need to be aware of this, particularly in how we are teaching music therapists to use technology in practice. To summarise the issues about practice, collaborations are a key to success. Collaborating with your client and also with interdisciplinary colleagues, particularly designers and engineers. Also, collaborate with colleagues who come from different generations, and this will help to ensure best practice. Knowledge and skills are more than just knowing how to use the technology. Certainly it's about getting fluid with using the technology, but understand the clinical applications. Don't use technology for technology's sake, and understand in particular when technology is indicated and most importantly when it's contraindicated. There are these three different types of research, and each of these has a different purpose, but one of the main problems has been that the research to date tends to have been isolated projects rather than programs of research. So future directions of research, where do we go? Well, this top-down model that we've seen a bit of, where designers and engineers come with a gadget and try and superimpose it upon people with disabilities, we need to move away from that and instead move towards bottom-up research, work with technology users, find out what they need and what they feel useful, and work with a bottom-up approach instead. Work in interdisciplinary teams, which brings in a nice mix of skills, including ours. Also, rather than these isolated projects, we need to be moving towards programs of research where projects are related to each other. Also, there is still a need for thick descriptions, but we also need to start moving towards evaluation of technology as it's used in therapy. Here are some useful resources on both practice and research on the topic, and we're just going to finish up by listening to what it is all about.
Elbow extended. Shriner's music therapist Annette Whitehead-Plow sings to Esteban and encourages him to play along on an iPod Touch.
The robot